Good. Is the lady sitting behind Libby?
You ready?
What's
that?
The lady sitting behind Libby.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Nantucket Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, February 5th. The meeting is called to order. Is there any public comment today on anything that is not on our agenda? Okay, hearing none. Moving along, I don't believe we have any minutes today, or do we? Barry, I don't think we have any.
I guess not.
No, okay. Thoughts. Committee reports. The only one I have, there is an audit committee. Is it where?
No, not that.
I didn't see it. Oh, I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, I know. She looks
Committee reports. The audit committee is meeting Monday at 1 o'clock upstairs, I believe. I'm looking now.
Say yes.
Yeah, I am now. Yeah, the audit committee is meeting at 1 o'clock on Monday?
Yes.
Upstairs. I have no other, any other committee reports? Okay. The next item on our agenda is a reserve fund transfer request from town administration, and this request is for general printing, is to cover the cost for print and circulation of inserts of the town warrant in the Inquirer and Mirror. So, Libby, thank you.
There's been a rate increase in the advertising rates for town public notices. We have a charter requirement that the town meeting warrant be published in the newspaper. Last year, the warrant cost approximately $20,000. This year, it's cost $32,000. We do not have enough money in our advertising budget. This was not an expected rate increase. So, been published.
And the amount requested will cover everything that you'll need?
It should.
It should,
yes.
okay. Okay. That's always unfortunate. Any questions?
Yeah.
Ms. Gibson? John, just speak in the microphone, please. Thank you.
Libby, if you're asking for 32, I thought the increase was from 20 to 32.
We're also kind of trying to cover the other, it's not specific, but the other public notices that we're going to need to print between January 1st and the end of the year. I mean, I guess we could ask for 12,000, but we're going to probably exceed our advertising budget anyway.
Okay. Cliff?
Do you think there'll come a day that, obviously newspapers were the way to advertise, but now that we have social media, who controls those laws that we have to follow?
Well, this is a local law. It's in the charter,
Okay.
so we could change it at any time. And I actually made a note in my 2016 annual town meeting file to consider retracting that requirement because, like you say, it's quite widely available without being in the newspaper. We could print booklets and just have them around town. It could be on the website. We could have it at the library, town hall. There's lots of options.
Okay.
Good. Something to ponder. Jim?
I move approval.
Okay, a motion for approval?
Second.
Second. Okay, discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, all is in favor of transferring $32,000 from the reserve fund for advertising for general printing. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. One question on changing that. Is that a town meeting vote?
Yes.
It would be,
Yeah.
okay. Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda, and this time I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Nantucket County Finance Review Committee. And is there any public comment on any county business for us today? Hearing none. Approval of minutes. I believe there are some in our packet from previous. Let's find them here. Let's see. Just get out that packet. we go. Just a second. Okay. In our packet for the county, there is a budget, and I thought we had minutes.
Oh, I don't know. We have minutes?
For last year?
No, there was only a sub-story.
There was? Okay. I misunderstood. Okay. Well, in our packet for the county budget, which was presented to the Board of Selectmen last night. So, Libby, I'll turn the floor over to you to overview, or Brian, or whoever would like to talk about it.
We're trying to get it on the screen for you.
Oh, okay, great.
Meanwhile, there are basically two agencies within the County of Nantucket, County Administration and the Registry of Deeds. The Registry of Deeds has two kind of categories to it, administration and deeds excise, which is kind of a special projects fund, I guess
Right.
we would call it. The county revenue sources include the town assessment, that's a warrant article annually. And just as a quick aside on the town assessment, in most counties, as you know, there are multiple towns, and they each would pay an assessment to the county for various services. In our case, obviously, there's just the one town, and so our fee is not so much based on services as a balancer to funding requirements for the Registry of Deeds.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the town assessment. We have deeds excise revenue. The deeds excise revenue comes from, it's the next slide, I think. Yeah, there you go, thank you. The deeds excise revenue comes from excise charges on recordings at the Registry of Deeds, and they vary in cost. And of that amount, the state gets a portion, and the remainder is split between the county administration and the Registry of Deeds. There are also other recording fees at the Registry of Deeds, which can fund their operations. We have special legislations that allows us to use corrections deeds excise, which we actually no longer receive except for this annual amount of $250,000, which goes to offset the debt service for this building. As an aside, corrections deeds excise used to come through the sheriff's office. However, the sheriff's office is now a state department, no longer part of the county. And then often, the Registry of Deeds will have a fund balance in their deeds excise fund, which they will use for offsetting expenses or various projects.
Okay.
For fiscal 16, the projected revenue from those sources is shown here. I won't go through each one, but the total projected revenue is $981,000. The county funding requirement, this is a statutory requirement. It's also known as the maintenance of effort, and by law, the county, as I'm saying on the slide, has to provide a certain amount of non-deeds excise tax to fund the Registry of Deeds. And that amount by statute increases 2.5% per year. The funding requirement for fiscal 16 is shown there. It's almost $300,000. And again, in other counties, this is probably a lot more relevant, but in our situation, we really don't even need the entire county funding requirement, but it is part of the law and it has not been changed for us, so we're obligated to raise it.
Just on that, the concern is, I know that, and I'll look over to Mr. Kelly, brought that up a few years ago. That is an expense that'll increase as years go by. Is there ever going to be a point where
There's no point at this point, but at some point, I'm sure we're going to want to talk to Representative Madden about it. I have talked to him about this in the past, but it was so difficult to get the county deeds, to get the corrections deeds excise amount dedicated to us that it was not going to be possible to change anything else for Nantucket in the near future. So
Okay.
I'm sure that within the next 3 to 5 years, we'll give it another try. There may also be other things happening with counties by then at the state level, so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Projected expenses for the next fiscal year are shown here. The county administration expenses are primarily legal and surveying and engineering and professional services, things like that. We have no actual employees in county administration. The county functions are handled in town administration. The Registry of Deeds has 3 full-time employees, and they have their expenses to run the department, and then special projects, which would be technology improvements, records restoration, things like that. And then we've got that debt service amount that I mentioned, which does offset the debt service for this building, and those projected expenses total $981,000. The next slide is just a comparison with the fiscal 15 budget, the current budget. The 16 projected budget is actually down a little bit.
Okay.
Next steps, now this is, we prepared this presentation a couple of weeks ago, and obviously we didn't meet on January 28th, so the county commissioners adopted this budget at its meeting last night, and you all are meeting today and hopefully adopting the budget, and then it simply moves forward. There are 2 articles on the warrant that pertain to the county budget. The first one is just the town assessment appropriation. The second is a kind of a placeholder article that is only on the warrant in the event that the county commissioners and the finance committee, acting as the county review committee, were to disagree on the budget. And that article would allow some number to be put forward. But luckily, that's never happened.
I don't foresee it, but.
I don't either.
Okay. Questions? John?
Libby, the budget's going down year to year. What's going on there?
We're probably spending a little less in legal and surveying and engineering, and
Yeah.
some of those costs are being absorbed by other funding sources, like developers paying for their own stuff. We try really hard when someone comes to the county or the town with some kind of a real estate or other sort of proposal, to have our legal review covered by them.
I see.
So there's a little bit of that going
Yeah, I
on.
noticed that the legal has gone down.
It's down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It all depends on the projects. We had some higher legal probably when we were doing Hummock Pond Road bike path and the easement takings that were necessary. We don't have anything like that right at the moment.
Okay, yep. Okay.
Further questions? Jim?
How has the town assessment changed over the last several years?
It's been, I don't know if we have those numbers handy, but it's been about the same roughly.
Because I remember 144 for some reason, but that may have been some other number.
It's a balancing number
But okay.
to balance the county funding requirement, but it hasn't changed significantly.
All right, thanks.
We can get that for you.
That's all right.
Right? Yep.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Any questions or comments from the audience? Okay. In the past, we've always taken our motions at this time, and would you like us to go ahead?
Sure.
Oh, Jim?
So
If you're
I'd
willing.
Make a motion to approve as the
Well,
finance.
I was going to say, well, there's Article 20 and 21. I think, why don't we do this by the book? The Article 20 is the appropriation for county assessment, and that's to see if the town will appropriate and also to raise, borrow pursuant to any applicable statute or transfer from available funds to pay the county of Nantucket such assessment as required for fiscal year 2016, and to authorize the expenditures of these funds for county purposes, all in accordance with the Massachusetts general laws and in accordance with the county charter, Chapter 290 of the Acts of 1996, the sum of $170,000, or to take any action related thereto.
Or make a motion to, our motion would read, motion to adopt.
That's correct, would be. Make that motion?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Question.
Oh, sure, before, yeah.
Maybe can I just ask what's going on with the deeds excise payroll? That it zeroed out?
The deeds excise,
And what is that?
that category generally comes from the deeds excise fund balance, and it's used for special projects. So from time to time, there's been an intern to do scanning or things like that, and they haven't had one. They're not projected to have one for fiscal 16.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion.
Second the motion.
Second motion for Article 20 to adopt. Comment on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's number 1. And then Article 21, which is the appropriation finalizing fiscal year 2016 county budget, and that's to see if the town will vote to overturn any denial of approval by the Nantucket County Review Committee of any item of the county budget for fiscal year 2016 by appropriating a sum of money for such county budget and authorizing expenditure of estimated county revenues, county reserve funds, county deed, excise fees, or other available county funds, including the town assessment for county purposes. Further, to see if the town will vote to overturn any denial by the Nantucket County Review Committee of the establishment of a county reserve fund from which transfers may be made to meet extraordinary or unforeseen expenditures with the approval of the county commissioners acting as a county advisory board executive committee within the meaning of Chapter 35, Section 32 of the Massachusetts General Law, or to take any other action related thereto. And again, that's a motion, I believe, to adopt.
Make a motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Second. Okay, discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. This concludes our county business for today. So I'd like to ask for an adjournment for the meeting. Thank you. And second? Okay, we're done with the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You leaving?
I am. I apologize already. See you Monday.
See you Monday. All right. Hopefully that's good. Okay. At this time, the next item is a review of the Nantucket Public Schools fiscal year 2016 budget, along with a review of the proposed elementary school project. And before I turn the floor over to Mr. Cozart, I would just want to repeat our sincerest condolences on the passing of Robin Harvey. She was a friend of this committee, and it's quite a loss for the community, and I'm sure it's affecting you all. So we want to give our condolences from this committee.
You're correct, Mr. Chairman. A devastating loss to the community.
Sure, it is, and very sad. With that note, I'd like to turn the floor over, and if you'd like to introduce any of your team members, and I'll be quiet and
Thank you.
take it away.
We appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the opportunity to come and present our budget to the committee. I am up here with the support of many members of the administrative team who are here perhaps to answer some specific questions that you might have in an area where I may not know the answer off the top of my head. Certainly, Finance Director Glenn Field, I'd like your permission for him to rescue me at any point.
He's an old friend, too.
That's right. And I don't know that I'll go through all of the introductions, but
Whoever you want to, I just want to give the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because
Thank
you for all for coming.
thank you. I thank them for all for being here. What we would like to do, I have two presentations for you today. The first one is the budget and capital requests, and the second is more specific to the building project.
Okay.
I've given you paper copies so that you can follow along that way.
Thank you.
Certainly, our budget is driven by enrollment. And if you look at the first slide, you can see in blue how the elementary school enrollment has increased pretty dramatically, as the high school has done. The middle school was increasing and had a little bit of a blip this year, but that's because we have one class, one grade level in the middle school that's a low number. I think it's the only class that's under 100. So that brings the middle school this year down a little bit. This is a 20-year look at our numbers. I think many of you have seen this before, but I think it's important to look at it. If you look at the top in 1993, the total column was 1,000. Today we have 1,557 students. I've joked that when I was looking at coming to Nantucket in 2009-10, I did my homework and I saw that the population, the enrollment had gone down for 4 years, and I said to my wife, well, at least I won't have to build a school. So since that time, in 2010 on, you can see that we've gone from 1289 to 1557 in 5 short years. That's a very significant increase for a relatively small school district. And of course, there are demographics that have changed as well. I think this 20-year snapshot is, pretty informative for you as a committee, but certainly for our whole community. The ELL population, that's English language learners. You'll hear a lot of acronyms: ESOL, ELL, LEP. This is the population of our community that has come from abroad, most cases. Although you have to be careful that we do have some children, maybe born in this country, who are still English language learners. Our rise here has been precipitous. From 2001 to today, 222 students today in our schools. This represents many different languages and ethnic groups. Certainly the largest is our Hispanic population, which is probably 80% or higher, but a growing Bulgarian population, Eastern European population, I think we know, and an increasing Asian population. We have quite a few students coming in from Nepal and other places in Asia. So it certainly makes us diverse, and with that come challenges, but also many, many opportunities for our students in our school district. Our special education population actually went down from 13-14 to 14-15, went down slightly. This gives you the profile of each school, and then the out-of-district numbers for the school, and I'll break that down a little bit further in the presentation. And please stop me if you have questions. Jim?
So you haven't seen a growth in the special ed population that you've seen in your general population?
I think you have to be careful to look at 1 year as a trend. So if you look at 14-15, there is it has gone down, but prior to that, there were 3 years of increasing numbers. I think the percentage of our population is generally around 16%, 15.5% of our population. So some of that may appear to be fewer numbers, but your percentage might actually be the same because you've added 75 students since last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The 2016 budget total is $25,436,642, the appropriation. That represents a little bit over a $1 million increase, $1,020,183. And I just want to show a couple of slides about the budget. This one will certainly give people pause for concern to see the budget going up each year. Actually, if you look at that 2009 figure, we went down and didn't recapture the 2009 level until 2012, which is a factor. That's interesting, but I think this puts it in more perspective, because although the budget allocation is going up, our per pupil expenditure has actually gone down over the last 4 years. And this only goes through fiscal year 2014. And again, that is a byproduct of the increases in enrollment moving faster than the budget, if you will. And again, you can see 2010 was a high point for that per pupil expenditure.
John?
Like a lot of organizations, as they grow, find that this type of number is not unusual, because
Yep.
there is something that comes with growth. You can make better use of certain types of certain individuals in the system. A little larger classes in certain areas that a class has been smaller and so forth. Is that? I don't know anything about
Yeah,
schools.
I think there are economies of scale, if you will, in some areas, and then there are not in others. Science classes at the high school level, which are lab classes, certainly can't continue to grow at the same rate because you can't safely have 25, 30 students in a lab class. A lot of people will talk about class size, and I think it is something we have to keep our eye on. But for me, it's far more about the number within the class size than the actual figure. I've had classes of 24 that were much more challenging than classes of 29 because of the makeup of a particular class. So you have to look at your needs in each group. Maybe special education, might be behavioral, might be language. So I think I always caution people who, when they get into the conversation about class size to, it's far more about who. Christy?
Do you have an across-the-board policy on class sizes, or do you vary?
Right.
as far as-
Good question. I think probably 10 years ago, the school committee did have a policy. They don't anymore have a specific policy on a number because people tied too much attention to, whether it was 22 or 24. That said, we do have a general policy, and we try to keep our early childhood classes lower as much as we can than perhaps a fourth and fifth grade in the same school. So, and then vocational, you might not want more than 15 at most in certain vocational programs. If you have auto shop or building trades, you get into safety issues on that. So we don't use a number. The Department of Education years ago went away from using numbers. And I believe that they went away because they were afraid that they'd be accused of an unfunded mandate for the towns that couldn't meet that. So all they do now is recommend.
Just a follow-up. Does the addition of a teacher's assistant have any effect on what a class size might be?
Generally, no. And the teacher assistants most often now are not general assistants, they're specific assistants for a child with special needs.
Okay.
So while they may, their task, according to the IEP, is to make sure that they are helping that particular child. Do they help other children around a little bit? Sure. But it doesn't really affect the numbers in the classroom.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
This is the other figure that you need to know about. Our Chapter 70 funds have gone up significantly. And while many schools on the mainland are complaining about Chapter 70, we have been fortunate. Again, that is driven by the enrollment. So we would expect it to go up. I have the 2015 year and then the projection for 2016, although that's just a projection at this point. Cliff?
When you say the enrollment, it's recognized that we have a big fluctuation, or it just goes?
There is a formula that is used. If you, I can bring Glenn up to speak to that formula, Cliff.
If it clarifies it all, Cliff, there's a final trail mandate that if a district doesn't get any other increase in their Chapter 70, they will be guaranteed $25 increase per new enrolled child. We booked 150, that's $3,750. Ours is going up 300, 400,000 at a leap. So enrollment is a nice addition to our Chapter 70 formula, but the real thing is that the state needed 7 years to do a 4-year phase-in so that personal income factor equals the property valuation factor. Those two, personal income, property assessment value, is what drives your Chapter 70. We're number one in the Commonwealth, county real estate value. But out of the 351 operating Commonwealth districts, the last time I looked at this, it's quite aged, at least 5-6 years ago. It was based on the 2005 income levels, which were used by the DESE until last year. Now they're using 2011 personal income. We were around 200. So again, our cash economy, our non-reported economy, our wages comped against other people, we were in the last third for Chapter 70 purposes, but our real estate value being 1, 2, or 3 knocked us out of getting any increase. Our last year, $1.4 million. This year, $1,742,000. Next year, at least $2 million, if not $2.1 million.
I was trying to put together all these different conversations I've had. I talked to the town clerk, and she discussed the fact that if she could have a proper census, that's why I kind of, that, you know, she could almost declare an emergency because of, you know, so many unreported people that live here. But obviously the numbers don't lie when it comes to the school. Kids are showing up, and it's kind of like the dump, getting rid of trash. So I'm trying to put that all together with the fact that we need a new school. And you know, is there any way to show the governor, the senators, whoever it is, that, you know, we're this gateway community? Where do we stand with that?
Well, we've actually had a discussion about that, and amongst the administrative team, I would agree with you that we are a gateway community. But the threshold, the benchmarks that they use for that are really more geared to the cities. And, you know, we wouldn't even be close to qualifying because of the raw numbers, but in terms of percentages, I would agree with you.
Okay. All right.
This is a graph of the federal grants. This is another source of revenue for us. These grants are mostly entitlement grants. The Title I grant is a grant that we use for remedial reading in the elementary school. And the Title II grant is a professional development grant, pretty small. It's one of those federal grants that has been decreasing each year. And then there are some smaller grants. The largest grant that we have is the IDEA, which is our special education grant. This year, or in 14-15, 319, 703. And then the one grant that probably has grown the most, as you would expect, is the Title III grant, 31,059. And that is for the education of English language learners, and that is based on our population increases. So that's gone up. I think it was 21,000 last year, and this year's up to 31. So just as a comparison, last year these grants totaled about 475, 479, so about a $50,000 increase. This just shows that 80% of our budget is payroll, 20% expenses. That has been the case for the last 4 years that I've presented to you.
Mike, I got a question on that, and I see this circle, and it makes perfect sense. But when I looked at the individual schools, there was 97%, and without guessing, I'm going to ask you to clarify the difference.
Yeah. The schools are very high. What brings that percentage, that overall, down is athletics, central office, special education, because especially special education residential tuitions. Those are areas that bring that percentage down on the whole. Did I leave something else out, Glenn?
Well, no, but I do want to town's architecture of the accounting system is DOR. Therefore, we have 4 budgets: NES, CPS, NHS, and Central. Central is where all the contracting is done, all your infrastructure, all your repairs, Diane O'Neill. Everything is done. So if you were to view us in town's accounting system, we'd all average out at the 80-20. When we present to school committee, we're presenting instructional budgets for NES. There's no maintenance, no facilities, no grounds, no infrastructure costs. It's instructional expenditures that we're reporting.
Okay.
So where all of their services, not all of the majority of the services are centralized under contracts from the superintendent's office, like busing and food service, etc. We are only studying the teacher expense ratio in each of the 3 buildings. That's why theirs is 97.3.
Thank you.
Thank you. This slide just shows you the breakdown within the district with the 3 schools and then facilities, central. This is the community school appropriation history. I've left some years in there that show you in 2000, it was 237,000. The high point for the appropriation was in 2002, at which time the appropriation was over 400,000. It dipped to a low of 219 in 2012, and for the last 3 years has been held steady at the 350,000 level. What you see above that is the level of participant fees that make that budget whole. This is a slide that I like showing. The residential tuitions. A residential tuition for a child can range from anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 a year. That's just sort of a off-the-wall figure, depending on, of course, the range of needs of a particular child. We have worked very hard in our district to keep as many children home and provide programs in our district so that we don't have to send students to the mainland. We don't have the advantage on Nantucket of sending a child to a day program that is shared by a collaborative of schools. So that's important to do. In 2010, there were 3 things that made the budget: the appropriation, and then in pink, the circuit breaker, which is the money that we got back through the formula for from the Commonwealth. And then in green, those first 3 years are the years that we had to make up the difference because perhaps we had more students with special needs than we expected, or because we didn't budget a large enough appropriation. Those were lean times that we were trying to be careful. So starting in 2012, you can see that we increased the appropriation, and then at the end of the year, we weren't scrambling to identify unexpended funds to make up that shortfall. The other thing that is of note here, and I certainly give Nancy Miller and all of her staff a lot of credit with being aggressive in increasing our circuit breaker funds, the money that comes back to us from the state. So you can see a pretty significant jump from 210,000 to 459, then up to 500. That number is a number that will fluctuate. And again, I think that that's a year, over a year out, that those funds are coming back to us. So that doesn't reflect the 16-year circuit breaker, right? Yeah, it goes back a year. So, but I think the other thing that this shows and is a decrease in the amount spent on residential placements. I think that is directly related to the programs that we have developed in-house. And so I'm very appreciative of the work of Mrs. Miller and the teachers.
Very good. Okay.
These are just the parameters that I gave to the administrative team as we develop the budget. Maintain or decrease class sizes, continue to develop curriculum and assessment, supporting our ELL students, and then developing programs for special needs. And I think we have done that the last few years, and we've also accomplished that in this budget. Here are the increases. We gave you in your, I think, comprehensive packet a one-page overview of the increases that were driving this budget. So I just thought I'd highlight them and take any questions. So we have a grade 1 teacher at NES. Right now, we have budgeted 7 kindergarten classes and 6 first grade classes. We don't really know what the kindergarten number will be because we've only done a registration. Typically, we will do a registration this time of year, but 30 to 40 new students will register between now and the opening of school in September. So it's a little bit of a wild card what that number may be. And so we're hedging that position. The other is adding a special education teacher at NES, technology integration teacher at the middle school, a science teacher at the high school. That is the one department, I think, that has only 4 teachers in it. I think English has 6 and math has 5, and social studies as well. Special education teacher at the high school, 1 more English language learner teacher, and then some support. That's actually secretarial support and curriculum and assessment. Additional speech language services, those are contracted services for the children who need those specific related services. Additional time for our computer techs. That's for a couple of people who have a school year contract. We are offering more and more summer programs now. We have a pretty full elementary and middle school summer program and are finding the need for tech support in the summer to support that. An additional custodian. Our custodial staff over the 5 years that I've been here was actually decreased, I think 1.5 positions in the last 5 years. And then transportation, yes.
I'm not custodial because that wouldn't be something that would be necessarily driven by an increase in numbers, more on a square foot basis. So what you're saying, by adding it, you're saying that it's been inadequate?
Yes. This is a position at the middle school and high school. We have eliminated carpeting in particular in many classrooms and have gone to tile. And so there's perhaps an increase in time in cleaning the tile. I don't know if Diane wants to speak any further to that, if you need anything further.
If it's more expensive to have tile, you must have had another reason for putting the tile on. We have at the high school, the bottom floor is below grade. And I think when you have space below grade, you typically have a little bit more problems with carpeting retaining moisture. And we thought that it would be much healthier for our students and staff replacing that carpeting with tile.
Oh, Jim, sorry.
Just, to expand on John's comment about square footage, but also activity also has an impact on facilities. So when you have, a lot more students, you're going to have a lot more people going to the restrooms, a lot more people walking on the floors. So you're going to need additional custodial resources.
Thank you. I'll remember that answer
Yeah.
when I'm asked the question next
Can you
time.
add one next year?
I don't necessarily agree with that, so I just,
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Well, at least you're speaking into the mic. Okay.
And then we are adding a bus. Again, we have added numbers, 325 children in 5 years, and we really haven't increased the bus fleet, and it's time to add one more bus to get those numbers down. Some aged children can ride 2 to a seat, and some, it's pretty tough. So we have some heavily populated routes, particularly South Road, Nobadir route, that we need to bring our numbers down. Christie?
Michael, is this the cost for an additional bus or for an additional bus route?
That's an additional bus and driver.
Okay.
Okay.
30,000?
Well, we use the Cape Cod Collaborative. It could be more than that as after we finish negotiations with them.
Okay.
Electric increases of $72,000. I think most of us have been reading the rate increases that we're facing of.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some cost savings.
I was just going to
Cliff?
ask, sorry, about the electricity. Did you lock in, I think the town, most of the town facilities
Yes,
locked? Okay.
we are with the town in that.
All right. So you still believe it's going to be 72,000 or more? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some cost savings. Fuel oil is going the opposite direction of electricity right now, so we anticipate a savings of over $35,000 in oil.
Fast enough.
Decrease in tech hardware of $93,000. We're still spending quite a bit on computer hardware, and we intend in the next few years to move as close as we can to one-to-one computing. But we felt that the expenditure this past year and the expenditure going forward, we could still do that.
Christie?
The, I'm sure it'll come up in, next few years if that's where you're going with that. But is that year to year? I mean, are you going to do everything at once? That just seems like
Yeah.
an enormous.
No, you're exactly right, Chris. We are talking about staggering it. Next year, we would like to go one-to-one computing for the 6th grade, and maybe pull off the 7th grade, but maybe the 6th grade. Then the following year, those students would keep their computers into the 7th grade and the new 6th grade, and then in 2 years, we would have 6th, 7th, 8th grade in the middle school. So we would also stage that in the high school level unless we had a community benefactor that might want to, or grants that might allow us to be more aggressive on that schedule. And the other thing that we're talking quite a bit about is leasing. We may be able to do this on a 3-year lease, and in technology, usually I'm a little leery about leasing, but in technology, with a lifespan of technology, it may be a better way to go.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, and this will be my last question because I know we're getting off of it. But, how do you ensure when you do that this computer doesn't become the computer for the household?
Well, there are a couple ways, and I don't think I will answer it adequately. Some schools don't have them bring it home. There are some middle schools that allow them to use it throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, it goes into the rack to be. Most high schools that go to one-to-one computing allow students to bring it home. The devices that are being used now are of choice is Chromebook, and the Chromebook has some limitations for some of the other applications that you might want at home. So I'm not sure in most cases that a Chromebook would replace the home computer, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'd also reduce the one ELL teaching assistant at the high school because we are hiring a teacher. And so we didn't feel that we would need the TA next year. And then, as I had mentioned before, reducing the residential placements significantly.
Great. Oh, Christie. Yeah.
Michael, would the decrease in the ELLTA offset the cost of the teacher in the 65,000?
Yes. Yeah, I think if you saw, you don't see it on this,
Okay.
but you see it in the budget line.
Got it.
Okay. If there were additional funding, not that there is, but we're always thinking and wondering, we would want more technology to support one-to-one computing. There are still more safety and security issues. I think I addressed this last year with you.
You did. And in fact, if I interrupt, are you satisfied with what has been placed right now?
We have done a lot of things. We have some things that are still out for bid, and some vestibules that will start in February, I believe, or April. So we won't complete all of the projects probably until the summer.
Okay.
But at that point, we will have made a significant investment and a significant improvement in safety and security. We completed the card swipe system on the entrances, and that's been a good system for us. And then several other things that we probably don't talk about too much publicly because they are things that help keep our children secure that the general public doesn't have to know. If that makes sense.
I think that answers the question. Great, thank you. Jim, and then John?
This is more a comment, but, I'm not speaking for the committee, just for myself, but as you know, if you have emergency one-time items, the Finance Committee has a source for funding for those, so certainly things like security or, I'm sure that's your prioritization, but I just want to make, because I think sometimes school's been reticent to use those funds, but they're certainly available for
Thank you.
the right cause.
Thank you. We try not to go to that well very often, so that when we do, you'll know that we've explored everything else.
Go ahead.
And I would say the capital has been generous in helping us accomplish many of those things.
We're all on the same team. Just to expand on what Jim is saying, is that there is a fund called the Reserve Fund, which is it's a specific amount is appropriated every year at town meeting that this committee can vote on for unforeseen expenses. And we certainly are always willing to listen to any unforeseen expense and to go from there.
Thank you very much. And that really concludes the PowerPoint on the budget, and I can move into capital, but I'll pause at this point to see if you have questions that are specific to the budget.
Anything on the operating budget? Chrissy?
Michael, I have a question for you. The funding for the community school,
Yes. 350,000.
yeah, how does that work? Because looking at the chart, it's very, you get like 3 or 4 years of the same amount, and another 3 or 4 years of the same amount as far as the appropriation. But I know in the last, I could see in the last maybe six years or so, it's been steadily increasing. You have from like 2003 to 2008, it's very levelly funded.
Yeah.
And so how does that?
It's a good question. The reason for the jump from the 200 level up to the 350 was because at that point in 2014, the community school assumed the payments for health insurance, which prior to that had not been included in their appropriation. So that answers maybe that level jump.
Okay.
I think, there's a balance between building programs, and Caitlin Waddington has worked very hard to expand and build programs for the community, and yet keep them affordable. And so I think they watch their appropriation fees. Caitlin and her predecessor, Pauline, will come and talk about any increase out of that appropriation when they feel they cannot adequately meet it. They are also very aggressive in seeking grants, and that helps offset and keeps that appropriation figure as level as we can make it.
Thank you.
Okay. Cliff?
You spoke about the health insurance. What was the purpose of that? Because I know all the health insurance is usually pooled right into the general fund.
Well, I don't know if Caitlin or Glenn, but that was that came up in a discussion with the town manager.
You're quite right as you phrased it, but however, the community school operates on grants and revolvers, which are called special funds, so it's not the common general fund.
Okay.
Except for the school committee layoff of that allocation of $350. The subsidy to try and keep participant fees very reasonable, to keep the programs accessible to the widest part of the island populace who would want to participate in those programs. The offset had dropped to almost 22%, down from 40% historically. So we were boosting it back to the 1/3 level when you see this flooring or
Yeah.
tiering to the 350. However, that was only for the first year. Now, Caitlin's rolled out enough new programs that you can see the revenue curve
Oh, yeah.
running up,
Yep.
and yet we're trying to hold the subsidies stable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Jim?
Since you brought this slide up, so do you have a margin on this business? I mean, in other words, are your revenues, what's your revenues and your compared to
Jim,
your address?
again, nothing formal, just like the classroom thing goes to a feel and consciousness versus setting guidelines that say 18 to 22. So we have to factor each year. I would hate to have it drop below that 20-25% level.
No, my question is, you've got revenues of $1.5 million and you've got expenses of X. Are your expenses $1.5 million, or are they less than that?
Last year's result was they had a surplus of $62,000,
Okay. All right.
which goes into their fund balance. So if we have a couple of 3 bad years, we've got a bit of a backstop there. The benefit, excuse me,
It's okay.
the town elected to no longer fund their medical benefits.
Right.
So it was not an option. It
Right.
was pro forma at around $80,000. It cost them $127,000. So our boosting it was actually just a token of their new net expense. They're doing well with it, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. All right. Chris?
This is really nitpicky.
Okay.
It's more of for just, on this slide, this is budget total, where it says this 642, the end of it. And then something that looked like it was voted on, the school committee, is 641.
Yeah, that's rounding.
What?
It's rounding
Okay.
in about 1,000 different line items.
Because that determines whether I approve or not.
I'm glad it came
And,
out with a variance of 1.
And you'll notice on your paper copy, I think it said FY15. I apologize for that. It's the 16th.
Moving on the Capitol,
I'm glad you noticed.
please. Moving on the Capitol.
And I'll let Diane take this over.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I will move forward.
Sorry.
All set?
Yep.
Take her away.
All right, our capital request this year, and I'm going to leave the school off because that's another presentation at the end. $1,050,000. That's what we total. The first, we're asking for $300,000 for an additional modular classroom. This will probably be at the elementary school. The most recent one was installed December of 13, sorry. There are 4 fifth grades currently residing in the modular classrooms, and with the overcrowding in the elementary school, we are asking for one more to get us through to the building, if that passes. The last one was $231,900, which included installation. It includes the monthly rental fee and the removal at the end. We ran into some problems. We didn't have enough room in the transformer. The electric company had to come and install some things. We ran into a lot of extra expenses. The total was almost $300,000 with escalation. We're assuming it's going to be around $300,000 for each of these modulars. Okay?
Great. Any questions on that? Any questions on that? Kristen?
Is this for purchase of a modular or
No,
lease?
we lease them.
Okay.
So the one of them, the original, I believe the school owns now. The second one we have on lease with a company named ModSpace, and it's a 3-year lease. Hopefully, we won't need it for longer than that, but
Yeah.
if we do, they were, accepting that they would extend the lease.
And this is a 3-year lease on this, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Greg?
Hi, Diane.
Hi.
How many students fit in the 1,400 and the 1,800 units, square foot units? Just for,
45 in one of them, because we take the modular and split it, so we have 2 classrooms. And the other one has 44.
45 and 44. Kristen?
Can I ask, and this might be for Michael, but is there an advantage to the students in one or the other, a modular as opposed to a classroom?
Maybe I'll answer that.
I'll speak to that, and then Kim can argue with me, because it really depends.
Yeah.
I've had my children in a modular classroom in New Hampshire quite a few years ago. They liked the fact that they had bathrooms in their classroom. As the students get older, they don't like the fact that they have bathrooms in the classroom. So I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I think the other advantage is that they're air conditioned, so that in September, when it can be pretty warm, or in May, June, when it can be pretty warm, they're probably a little bit more comfortable. The downside is that they are more cramped. We cannot put large class size into those because it's tighter. A general classroom is 900 square feet. These are closer to 800 square feet for each of the classrooms.
Okay.
Okay.
If you ask the children, they like to be in the modular. Probably not this week and last week, but they have appreciated the opportunity to be away from the rest of the building. But for some of our instructional purposes, we have some transition time moving kids from there into the building.
Thank you.
Let's just hope it's a transitional item.
What's that?
Let's hope it's a transitional item. Anyway, any other questions on modular? Okay, moving on.
The next capital request is $100,000 for Phase 2 of our window replacement project at the high school and middle school. So this year, I had a company come in and replace lots of the, actually most of the windows, the regular windows, the mechanisms that, move them freely. There were a lot of them that were stuck and that they just didn't work anymore. I think everyone's pleased with that. I know the middle school are very pleased. And we're starting to replace the large banks of windows. So I just had the large bank behind the main stairwell in the high school replaced. Most of the panes were compromised. They're no longer energy efficient. They're fogged. It's cold. We've noticed a huge improvement since we've done that. And also, when the carpenter pulled it apart, you can see by the photograph, there is a lot of rot back there. They're not flashed properly, or the flashing is just gone at this point. They definitely need to be replaced. So I'm working on that. I just got a price to do one bank in the pool area because some of those are compromised as well. And we're just going to move, hopefully keep this going and get them all replaced at some point.
Great. Okay, questions on the windows? John?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, how long do you figure it'll take you to replace them all?
I think it depends on if, this is phase 2, and that's another 100,000, and of course I go out to bid, and I have it in for the next 2 years after this, so hopefully we'll have most of them replaced by then.
Very good.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, the next is for a second modular. And this was originally for the central office, because we need to move out of the high school because they are out of room. We are going to move out this summer. This modular may end up being for the community school offices. I am currently looking for rental space for them for a 3-year lease until the new building is built, and they can use space in the existing elementary school. So this is a temporary fix. Again, 3-year lease. Hopefully, we won't need it longer than that. But everyone's out of space.
Okay. Question? Christie?
Diane, what's the difference between moving central office out to a module as opposed to a classroom? Other than the fact that the older kids don't like the module.
I'll take that if you don't mind. I love being in the high school. I interact with the kids every day, and it's wonderful. But it just doesn't make sense to me to have students going in and out of the building when the adults could be out there and doing the same thing. There are fewer security issues, and I just think it's passage of time. In the halls. We occupy 2 classrooms in my area in the back corner of the high school. So they are going to need. They have a new science teacher coming in with this budget. They have a new special ed teacher. Those are spaces that would immediately be used by them. And if we were to move to maybe First Way, we are still accessible to the entire faculty that might need to come in and see people in my office. But to us, it makes more sense for us to move.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Move on.
The next is $150,000 for the Bacchus Lane storage, which is over by the Bacchus Lane athletic fields. We did have $125,000 appropriated in 13, but after going for design, we've discovered it's just not enough money for construction. And this is construction of a shell. It literally will be a shell with hopefully bathrooms right now. Later on, we can go in and, figure out maybe using some other, maybe finishing off the inside, but right now it's going to be athletic storage.
Okay. Cliff?
Was this the original design? So it just wasn't enough money?
Right, yes. That's not the original design. That's not the one that went to HDC. The one that went to HDC, it had just 2 large sections and nothing in the middle. And this is definitely more efficient than a building like that.
So that's going to be placed on top of those foundation
Yes.
pieces?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Further questions? Okay, very good.
Okay, the elementary school generator. The elementary school generator is very, very much out of date. It no longer transfers over on its own. We've hired an engineering firm to design a new one. It will be outside the building in a self-contained fuel tank under it. if this money is appropriated, I'll definitely move forward quickly with getting that installed. I think it's very important for the school.
Okay. All right. And, oh, go ahead, Cliff, yep.
Why take it outside? Do you think it would be beneficial to keep it for longevity, to keep it inside, just to replace the one that we have inside?
Because the engineering firm told us we can no longer keep it inside because of the fuel. It's no longer to code. If it's in, you can't replace, you can leave it like that, obviously, it was to code when it was built, but if we're replacing the generator, we cannot put it back inside.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Now, for these capital projects, these will be outlined in Article 10, when our motion is presented for us, and the operating expenses, you all may be well aware, is in Article 8. Now we move along to a separate debt exclusion article for a new school, and that's Article 12, and there is, you did receive information, and Mr. Gozar brought some information today. So again, I'll give you the floor, and I just want to thank you for all your effort and time spent. Just from looking at it on the periphery, it's quite a endeavor that you're undertaking, and good luck.
Thank you. It's, I'm going to try to take you through probably an hour presentation in 20 minutes, and so if I'm going too quickly and you need to slow me down, please do. There have been many previous studies, and I know many of you are aware of those previous studies. In 1999 and again in 2008, it was determined by two different architectural firms that we needed to add space at the elementary school. We've gone from a school that was designed, depending on who you listen to, 500 to 550 students, has now has over 700 students. And that really actually places it as one of the largest elementary schools in the Commonwealth, which I find interesting. So we brought in a group of architects to do an existing conditions assessment a year ago. They went through all of our schools. We have about a 2-inch thick report. And what it said, although we needed to improve certain systems, the buildings were in good shape, but they were not designed for either the numbers or the needs of the children that we have today. So we went to a group to have a demographic study done. This was Jerome McKibben and Frank Cropper, who are actually from, I think, Atlanta and Ohio. But they came in and they've done studies in other areas like Nantucket that are sort of hard to project what an enrollment might be. Their report indicated that our enrollment will continue to rise through 2020, at which time it will level off and perhaps begin to decrease at 2020. So it's an interesting report. I would say to you that if the numbers leveled off today, we need a new school. We have added 325 students in 5 years to buildings that were already filled. So we began talking about what needed to be built and where, and we put together a building committee. That's the same enrollment that you saw before, so I won't spend time on that. Mm-hmm. Here's the building committee. We put out an ad. We encouraged community members. Thought you might just like to see some of the names. You'll recognize people. We have teachers, we have parents, we have people in the construction field, we have senior citizens, grandparents, administrators, and even some town officials have helped us in looking at the needs and particularly into the parking and traffic flow, because that drives a lot of the things that when you place a school. The first thing that committee did was talk about what we needed and determine that a grade 3, 4, 5, what I would refer to as an intermediate school, was the best school design that would allow us to have numbers between 400 and 450 in each school, which is a good, a much more reasonable number. In addition to the intermediate school was an addition to the middle school, because those numbers that you saw earlier, the 125 and 135 that are in kindergarten and first grade, are going to be rumbling through our district soon. So after it was determined what we were going to build or for whom, the determination, the next question was where. And we looked at 6 or 7 different sites. And actually, Diane, if I can ask you to use the arrow. It's hard for me to talk and do both. The first 2 sites that we looked at were Bacchus Lane. Okay, I think you can do it with the arrow. So Bacchus Lane was the first property that we looked at. As many of you know, there are deed restrictions on that land, and although it was attractive because it was away from the existing school, we did not want to fight that fight, and we wanted to respect the Bacchus family and their gift to the town and school for playing fields. So then we went over to what I refer to as the valley between the elementary and the middle school, this area. At first, we looked at the back, where you now see the parking lot. Actually, right now, that's the garden, elementary school garden back there. And we looked at that as a potential site, and then where the baseball field. The problem the committee felt with those 2 sites was the entrance onto First Way. That is really not conducive to that much traffic, particularly as you exit First Way. If you've ever tried to exit and go left, you know that the traffic comes down pretty quickly down Surfside. And we didn't want to have a lot of buses going in there and out every day. And so that left 2 other sites to explore, one right on Surfside, in the front of Surfside, which was talked about quite a bit, and may eventually have to be a site for a school if in the 15, 20, 25-year consideration for Nantucket. But right now, we felt that continued to put some pressure on Surfside with the traffic. So we decided to locate it in an L where the existing parking lot is at the elementary school. And what that would allow is 2 different loops as people come into the school. The first loop off of Surfside would be for only buses, no cars, although teachers would go into that parking lot there. If any of you have dropped children off at the elementary school, you know the problem of the buses and the cars dropping off in the same location. So the other loop would allow parents to drop off their preschool children and continue, drop off their 1st, 2nd, or 3rd through 5th graders, and then exit. If they have a middle school or a high school child, we are going to create a sort of a cross-campus loop here that would allow them to go that way, drop off their middle schooler and the high schooler, and go to Sparks. This will take a lot of traffic off of Surfside, where there's a considerable backup in the morning. That cross-campus drive, however, would only be used at morning bus and afternoon bus. It would be gated and not used as a cut-through and not present a challenge to our children during the day out at recess. Mike Burns, Andrew Vorse were, I think, instrumental in participating in this and helping us come up with that design. So we think traffic flow will be improved. The other problem in our schools and arguably in our town is parking. And we have added there a 177-space parking lot. That would serve the existing elementary school, but it also provides event parking for the middle and high school. And anybody who has gone to December Delight or Election Day or any other big event at the high school knows that parking is a little bit crazy there. So that would substantially alleviate some of the event parking, the need for event parking. So if we go forward, I think, oh, excuse me, thank you. The middle school addition would be at the back of the middle school, and I'll show you the interior layouts here in a minute, and would be a 6-classroom addition where the now houses the building trades program. Thank you. So this is the ground floor of the new intermediate school. It will be a 2-floor structure because of the confinement of the site. On the ground floor will be the 3rd grade cluster of classrooms, 7 classrooms around a general classroom cluster, with spaces off of that corridor for ELL, special ed, and other ancillary tutoring or testing spaces. The main entrance is there. You come into the building, go to the gym to the left and the media center, cafeteria. We wanted to make sure that all of the common spaces that might be used at night are in the front of the building, and you don't have to walk through the entire building to get to a space. If you're familiar with the elementary school now, if you want to go to the cafeteria, you have to walk through the building. If you want to go to the library, you have to walk through the building. So all of those would be in the front. If you go back space, one of the things that we liked about this design is that the entrances of the 2 schools face each other. So, and that the loop, the drive, does not go straight through there, so that there is green space and safe places for children. So now you can go back.
Christie?
Yes, Christie.
Michael, just from this plan, there doesn't, although you point out that it's nice that the entrances face each other, there doesn't seem to be a clear path that goes from entrance to entrance.
I think you might be able to see that on another slide. And again, these drawings are conceptual.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have the actual design and engineering. Let's go one more. This is the upstairs, 4th and 5th grade, which are similar to the 3rd grade downstairs. The total square footage of the building is almost 72,000 square feet. This is a rendering of what it might look, and Christy, this gives you a little bit better idea of the space that is defined for those students to go back and forth. The other advantage of the schools being close to each other and the proximity is that you could share staff. And there may be some staff that physical education, music, art, those are areas that might provide us an economy of scale. This is the back that you might see near Bacchus Lane. There will be a patio back there off of the cafeteria. And then the media center is to the right, also looking out there. This is the addition to the middle school. You can see there are 6 classrooms and bathrooms at the end, and it goes from right to left back towards what is the cafeteria. But it is not connected. If we wanted to connect those buildings, then we have to bring the entire middle school up to code, the existing code, and the expense would be considerable. A new school does a lot for our 3 through 5, and the addition does a lot for the 6th, 7th, 8th grade students. One of the pieces that I like is that the existing elementary school will now have space to do a lot of things that it cannot presently do. For one, we would put the community school in the existing Nantucket Elementary School. That is great from my perspective because it allows the early childhood center that used to be in the high school, in the back of the high school, and is no longer. It puts it in the primary school, which will be those children's first school. It's one less transition. That's where the ECC should be. And the other half of that would be community school offices. The other thing that this allows for is in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, I'm not sure what it will be, but I am fully convinced that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the nation will go to universal preschool, the education of all 4-year-olds. Right now, we educate 25 children in our preschool programs, primarily children with special needs that are required to be educated starting at age 3. But universal preschool is coming our way, and that will allow us to have the room for all of those students. I think the other thing in the front of the building, you'll see central office. The superintendent's office could move into this space. But in 3 years, when this is built, if the numbers keep coming faster than we plan, we don't have to be in there. And that sort of builds in some future space for those ages. The other thing, there are 3 community spaces, and I've heard a lot of intriguing ideas for how they might be used. I've heard somebody say, let's have a parent resource room where parents can come in, get books on education, on parenting. I've heard the suggestion that we might put in adult daycare. What a great combination, adult daycare and primary age children. It could be a win-win. I don't know. I think it's a possibility. And another thought that somebody suggested to me was community health. A lot of schools are going to spaces within the school for health for the parents, sort of one-stop shopping. Might be behavioral health, which we know in our community is looking for space. So there are some possibilities there, but we haven't committed that space because when this opens, which could be September of 17 or January of 18, I don't know what our numbers will be. Exactly. So this allows us some room for expansion at that level. Then these are the costs. I'm sorry.
No, you can keep up. We talk about the expense of the building. What do you think the budget's going to be as far as the increase for the operation of the building once we obviously...
We're working on that. I think you're definitely correct in that there will be some additional costs. A lot of the staff might move over from the existing school to follow. The 3rd grade staff will follow 3rd graders into the new school, 4th grade, 5th grade. The biggest factor will be custodial because you're adding 72,000 square feet of building space, so you're going to need custodians to clean that. I think you're going to probably you will need another school nurse. And there will be some other needs. We haven't got that for you today, but we are developing that because we know that that's a question.
Right, I mean, also oil, electricity.
Yes, utilities, absolutely. The costs here in blue and yellow are your actual construction costs, and there's a lot of discussion about that. If in a perfect world, this year we might have been coming to you for just the design and engineering costs, and the following year come for a building. But, you know, our mantra right now is we can't wait. You know, the students are here now, and so we combine the design and engineering. So you have to be careful not to add those to your per square foot construction costs. And I have a couple of slides that take that out. Here's some local projects with square footage and construction costs. We have separated out costs, tried to compare apples to apples with what might be simply cost per square foot. So you can see the new school at $448 per square foot compared to the addition, compared to the public safety facility. You have to be careful of the dates that these things were built, because there's certainly an escalation figure there. Boys and Girls Club, $10 million is about $500 per square foot, and the numbers, Diane, that you got, I think, from the fire station showed that. We also put some Massachusetts School Building Authority projects for you to see. Again, I would caution you that if you're looking at Weston Elementary School, for example, that's a 2012 cost. Okay? And we have one other handout that we just developed today that I would like to give to you. This was not developed by us. This was developed, and I would bring you to the middle graph, which shows you the schools built most recently in the Commonwealth, but adjusted for 2016 construction costs. So, for example, you will see, Lexington. It didn't cost them $389 per square foot when they built it. But if they were to build that building today, that's the adjusted cost. We felt that that was a more accurate comparison to our per square foot construction cost. You'll also see a line, you'll see the 448, but you'll see a line at 336. That is what a project manager organization that we've been talking to projected is the Nantucket factor at about 25% more than what you will find on the mainland. So if you took out that 25%, you can see what our square footage costs to compare might be.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to end it here. On a $1 million home, it's an estimated $170 per year on for the tax impact. It's $14.16 per month. There are some people that feel that that 170 might be a little bit high, but we felt that that was the responsible figure in talking to Libby to use for the community at this point. John?
Yeah. And where did that figure come from?
Where did what?
The 170?
That came from Brian and Libby.
Okay, I thought probably. Brian, does that figure have some smoothing in it and so forth in timing? Or is that?
No, I mean, that's just what the impact would be.
Excuse me?
Thank you.
That's what the impact would be based on the valuations today, regardless of whether I borrow it today or 4 years from now. So that's just the impact up to the tax rate, not at any point in time, yeah.
Okay. Jim?
That's 5.5%, I think, 20 years. Am I right, Brian? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. I think, well, that would be, in the first few years, I think it might have been 4%, because I think that's what it was done. We actually did the projection for all 20-plus years. That's actually, I believe, the first per year for the projection that we did.
Okay. Thank you. Jim?
A question, then a follow-up. Do your construction numbers assume are those today's dollars, or I hope they're escalated for construction at a point in time in the future?
Escalation is in there.
Contingencies are also in there.
Okay.
Continue.
And then, we're estimating for healthcare that cost of construction is rising for our budget purposes between 6% and 8% a year, and in healthcare. So we are looking at some different ways of construction that would, in fact, do a lot of the pre-construction off-site in large warehouses and bring modular kind of activity and dramatically reducing the time for construction.
We had that conversation today, as a matter of fact. We were interviewing the owner's project management groups on projects, and we talked about exactly that and where the savings could be realized in this.
And there's some CM firms that are better than others, so if that's something you're looking for, it's good for somebody who's got experience doing that. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Craig?
I'll go after.
Okay, Cliff, and then Craig.
Isn't it true with like sewers, we only pay like 2% interest? Do we actually pay 5% for a school?
You have to remember that these projections are based on what we think interest rates are going to do in 20-plus years, over 20-plus years. The sewer rate, the sewer 2% is through the Massachusetts Water Pollution Abatement Trust, and it's a 2% rate through them, but that's only for 20-year borrowings. Anything above 20 years with them, you actually will pay between 50 and 60 basis points higher than 2%. So that 2% is through a special fund that the state has. This borrowing would be us going to market on our own. And realistically, that is First Southwest and us having discussions about what we think, because realistically, the way we have anticipated this is that the permanent borrowing is not going to be on the town's books until 2019 at the earliest, because we would not permanently borrow until the project is 100% complete. So that's at least probably 24 to 36 months away before we actually go through that exercise. So we've added something that is maybe a little bit higher for these projections. Realistically, we're probably going to be less than 3%, but I don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 years with interest rates. So we have kind of hedged our bet a little bit based on their advice for the projections.
Okay. All right. Craig?
Yes. Can we discuss the MSBA and how all that plays into this as far as timing with the application and with town meeting coming? And
I'll let Diane start, and then I'll tag team with.
The MSBA process is, I guess, the easiest way to explain it, it's either or. They don't come in and give you $5 million to help you. They either accept you into their program or they don't. So they had 108 applicants. I just saw her email today. They accepted 15 based on the most urgent need in communities. And we didn't make the cut. We are applying again. If this appropriation does not pass, we hope to make the cut next year, although there isn't any guarantee to that. When the MSBA takes a project and accepts you into their program, they start from square one. So our existing conditions, our space needs studies, we can just put those aside because they do their own. The city-town doesn't really have a lot of say in what's built. I think you get 3 votes out of 7 or 8, I can't remember. But it's an either-or process, and I think that people don't understand that. They think that MSBA will just give you a grant to help you, and that is not how it works. They also don't fund the entire project. They fund a portion, and only a portion of eligible reimbursements. So you have to have the appropriation up front. You have to make the payments, and then they reimburse you for eligible expenses only.
So, for example, so if the cost for this school is going to be $32 million and change for the construction, would that not be eligible? Or is that?
Not the whole thing. I think it runs about 40% that they reimburse.
Yes, correct. Okay. So, if I understand, the applications have to be in April 10th for MSBA, and they make a decision this fall. That was my understanding. Because to let you know, I spoke to Diane Sullivan today at the MSBA, and she indicated that the applications are in by April 10th, and the decisions are made in the fall for who they select. And it is there's a lot of applications, and there's only a few winners, so to speak. But she made the point to me, and because I was asking, I was saying, here we are, Nantucket, we have the reputation of being millionaires serving billionaires, and it's really not the case. We have urgent needs. And she said, well, I saw that you applied last year, and she said, I see that you're applying again. What's new and different this year? If the need is still there for overcrowding, then you really have to make that point. She kind of was saying that, she didn't say it in so many words, but it was the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
I hesitate to speak for the MSBA, and I applaud you for calling her. We have been in touch with them and asked them if they could give us some feedback on our application as to why we did not. Her answer was fairly vague, and I understand that that's not what they do. They don't give feedback to each applicant. I think we needed to do this. We did this years ago. We applied in, I think, 2009 and 2010, 8, 9, and 10. What we heard back then was that you have a need based on your enrollment. Other schools have a need based on not only their enrollment, but dilapidated buildings. And your buildings are not falling down around you. And so I think that they made it clear back then, some of the buildings, if you're only accepting a dozen out of 100 applicants, you're probably looking at the buildings that are in the worst shape, maybe 1940s and 50s buildings. They didn't say that directly to us this time.
Sure. Well, and that's good, Mr. Chairman. Because if you go on their website, you'll see that it's not just the most in need, let's say, that are getting the money. Because you have Concord getting $6.5 million, Carlisle getting $6.4 million, Brookline $13 million, Wellesley $38 million. These are not poor communities.
No, you're right. I lived in Weston. I know Wellesley well. But again, if you were to look at the condition of their buildings, I bet that is the factor that maybe promoted them. I can only guess that promoted them, or more political weight. I don't know.
And that's a good point, because it brings up, and I asked Diane Sullivan today, I said, is it a case of getting Representative Madden in on our case, or Senator Wolf to come? And she said, I can't answer that, but she kind of said, the more noise you make, the more attention you're going to get. And if you can point out your need, then it goes to the top of the list.
I do know that Representative Madden and I have had conversations on this several times, and I know that he's aware of our need. I don't know politically exactly how it works, and I wouldn't suggest that one person is more powerful voice than another, but.
To follow up, hold on a second. Follow up with that. So you will put an application in April, correct, for this? So we'll follow the process as it plays out here, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And if we're to come to a successful conclusion at the ballot box, and you were accepted into the program, that would be a win-win. They're not mutually exclusive.
They most likely won't accept us if we are
So if
moving
the ballot
forward with
box
our
is
project.
successful, the applications drop.
They won't, I
Okay.
really, I highly doubt they'll
Okay.
accept the project because they start from scratch. So if you've already got your
Okay.
architect on board and your owner's project manager and you're moving forward, they want to start from square one and control.
You explained that before. Okay.
And I would just add that you have to understand that were we selected this year, that, while it brings money, it brings strings and time. So the building, the construction time would probably be over 5 years instead of 3 years. With that comes some extra costs as well. That might mitigate the savings.
John?
Mike, I've spent some time looking at state grants, and I can't speak for this particular one, but I know the ones I have looked at, I found the restrictions, and they're really wanting to take over the design and construction of your facility as being onerous, to the point where we backed away from it completely, because we said, we have no control. So I don't know that that just happens to be a couple of state granting agencies, which is not this one, but I was stunned by the amount of control that they wanted for such a fairly small amount of money, quite frankly. So that's a warning that I throw out there, you know.
Greg?
And to follow up on that, John, with whether it's 30% or 40%, which MSBA provides, that's a big number. I mean, if we're talking about and whatever the number is, 47 million, a third of 47 million or a third of 32 million, whatever, we're talking 10 million bucks. That's a lot of money. So even with additional controls, and I'm sure that's a concern, that it might take longer and there might be more, strings, that's still a substantial amount of money in my opinion.
So noted. Christie?
Just a comment, not to the point to where you chance next year not being one of those 15 out of 100 and so to delay a project that the community needs significantly.
Well, Jim?
So you have
Would have been nice.
So you have a communications challenge as you talk about this at town meeting. It'll be important that you separate those two issues so people are clear what they're voting on, and don't hold that out as something that possibly could happen.
I think
It's a comment, not a
you're
question.
right, and we will have, we have a meeting at 6 o'clock with the building committee to share some things, and we're doing FAQs, and we're doing a lot of what you're doing, certainly, and one of the FAQs is what happens if it doesn't pass? And we'll be doing the analysis of how much it's going to cost us, how much more it's going to cost us each year that we delay, and balancing that against the possible savings if we were to get it.
Okay. Craig?
And maybe I'm not understanding this properly. So it goes in April 10th for a decision, we get the decision in the fall. If it goes to town meeting and gets voted on, we're taking ourselves out of the game. So wouldn't it make sense to say, don't bring it to town meeting, let it go to, let it go through the course, and if we get the money in the fall, awesome. If we don't, it comes back. All right, so we delayed a year, but we're also kissing off $10 million. Are we willing to do that?
Okay, I hear you, but I also have gone through it this year and didn't get it. So I'm not as hopeful that in the next year we're going to get it as you are, and we will have lost that year.
Well, I mean, I'm not a betting man, but 15 communities out of 108 those aren't terrible odds. I mean, and then if we add
12%.
additional, pressure, we bring in the big guns and get Nantucket on the map. Because it seems to now, of the years that MSBA has been in operation, they've spent $11 billion, and Nantucket has got zero. None.
Jim?
So just another comment. I can't remember, it's been 3 or 4 years since I was chairman, and I remember it was my annual call to the superintendent and to the chairman of the school committee saying, you need a new elementary school. And they're like, yeah, we're working on it. You need a new elementary school. And this process, to me, has taken longer than it should, and I think it's time to act, personally. It's just a comment.
There was an MSBA application in 2008, 2009, and 2010, and they were denied each year. And I read the applications, and they were very urgent and very well put together. And Mike and I used some of the backup, for the systems when we did this application. So you're right, there is not a guarantee, and adding a year is going to add cost.
Certainly has cost. Well, I think at this point, the process plays out. It looks like, from my perspective, you're doing your due diligence by the process through the town meeting and going through the MSBA, is that right? And doing that. So let the process play out. Further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And again, just to go over the process, this is, we will be making a motion on this article, Article 12, and there'll be an appropriation if it's a positive motion or negative, and comes to town meeting, and if that's successful at town meeting, the ballot box, then a certified result, and if that's successful, then away you go. But
You don't wait till the seams are busted.
okay. You're welcome. Thank you. And again, thanks for all your hard work. Thank you for a very nice presentation, and best of luck on that. Okay. Moving on to the next item, I believe we're about done, is date of the next meeting is February 9th, and that will be our public hearings. They'll be here. I do want to just update on the subcommittee. We originally had scheduled a meeting a week from today for 3 o'clock, but we could not get a room, so it was moved back till 6 o'clock. And the second point, the second point is I did attend the selectmen's meeting last night, and a charge was approved. I have not seen it yet. I did send out a older charge, which I happened to is the one that actually I had written 2 years ago, but I forgot. And so that's something to go on, but there'll be a more official one. The only concern I have with the charge last night, the original expectation was to have a result by March 11th, and I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. So
Of 2016?
yeah. So, well, I agree. I'm just saying, so right now, the selectmen would like something by March 25th, and so, which is still a little bit ambitious. So, but that's where we are.
Minutes of the first meeting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can be
Not
ambitious.
approved, though.
We can be ambitious. So, anyway, that's where we are on that.
When is the first meeting of the?
It's a week from tonight, February 12th, at 6 p.m. right here.
This information needs
Okay.
to be soured.
All right, and there is an agenda, too, for that, too. So I did that. 6 o'clock. But now we're having our meeting, regular meeting at 4 o'clock. Okay. Boy, that cleared out fast. Okay. So, anyway, date of our next meeting. Any other comments or concerns? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Second? Okay, everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.
He hit a call. He also.
No. This isn't serious. It's good that you're, I'm sure they appreciate that you're looking into it. And when you're going to look into it, the road is what triggered me to look up that other wealthy communities were getting this? Was there something that you heard we didn't get because we're a wealthy community? Yeah. I've heard that with other, I've not heard that with this, but.
Actually, the website's very friendly. You can just click and it brings up
There was no kidding.
anywhere you want to look at.
Everybody,